Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Before we get into today's case, I just wanted to say thank you so much for clicking on this video. Please remember that this video is for informational purposes only. Please like and subscribe. It's a free way that you can help me out. Today we will be talking about Melissa Ann Shepard, also known as the Internet Black Widow. Melissa was also known as Melissa Ann Friedrich, Melissa Ann Stewart, and Melissa Ann Weeks, due to the aliases that her several, not always legal marriages had provided her with. So, let's dive on in. Melissa Ann Russell, known by the nickname Millie, was born on 16 May 1934 in Burnt Church, New Brunswick, Canada. She had a tough upbringing, and in 1953 she moved to Ontario, Canada to live with her aunt, and she completed high school through evening correspondence at Stafford College. In 1955, at the age of 21, Melissa met future husband Russell Shepard, who was a factory worker. They soon get married and they have 2 children. Not much is known about Millie's children or her first husband. But what we do know is that he might have been the only man that she got involved with that made it out without becoming a quote-unquote victim of Melissa. Even though Millie was married and she had 2 children, she did not quite enjoy living on the straight and narrow. No one really knows what led to the things that she had done. Millie was charged with a string of crimes, including false pretenses fraud, forgery, and impersonation, as well as littering in Toronto and in Georgetown, Prince Edward Island, that she had committed between 1970 and 1985. She was convicted of the crimes and spent 5 years in jail. After being released from jail, but still legally married to Russell, she meets and starts a relationship with 42-year-old Gordon Stewart in 1989. Millie was 55 years old at the time. Gordon was a widower who had recently retired from military services and was still grieving the death of his wife. Millie and Gordon met on a blind date through a Lonely Hearts column. He had only recently lost his wife and had still been struggling to remove his wedding ring when Millie swooped in and promised to take care of him. Although she had not been divorced from her first husband Russell yet, she went ahead and married Gordon not once, but twice. Once in Vancouver and again in Las Vegas in 1990. Gordon and Melissa had a seemingly tumultuous relationship, one that involved either trips to the hospital or trips to jail. Gordon became suspicious of Millie not long after they were married, as he noticed that his retirement savings were dwindling away fast. He had also mentioned to his friends and family that he felt like she had been cheating on him. Just before Christmas in 1990, Gordon Stewart was found in their apartment, disoriented and foaming at the mouth, and he was immediately rushed to hospital. Lab tests showed that he had large amounts of benzodiazepine in his system. Now, this was not a drug that Gordon has a prescription for, or a drug that he had taken by himself, according to him. Benzodiazepines are a psychoactive drug usually prescribed for insomnia, seizures, muscle spasms, or anxiety. This includes medicines like Valium, clonazepam, and temazepam. Abuse of this medication can lead to disorientation, deep sleep, and even death. The medication is listed as potentially inappropriate medication for elderly patients, as its side effects might include things like memory problems, daytime sedation, impaired motor coordination, and can even mimic dementia. After Gordon's recovery and release from hospital, he had been even more suspicious of Millie and thought that not only had she been responsible for spending his money, but she must have also been responsible for poisoning him with the said medication. One day they got into a huge fight with accusations being thrown back and forth between the two, and he ended up slapping her across the face. Millie reported him to the police and laid charges of DV against him. He pled guilty to assaulting her and spent some time in jail. Melissa visited him in jail on numerous occasions, even though she was the one to lay the charges against him. Upon his release on parole in March 1991, the judge had ordered him to stay away from Melissa, but soon after his release, she initiated contact with him under false pretenses and told him that she had wanted to repair their marriage. On 21 April 1991, they decided that a clean slate might be good for them, and they moved to Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Their reconciliation did not last all too long though. Within a week, the fighting had started up again, and it got really bad. Gordon was adamant that he wanted his money back that he had been convinced Millie had been spending. On 27 April 1991, Melissa reported that she had killed her husband in self-defense when she drove over him with their car on a deserted road. She reported his death 3 hours after the incident took place. She told the police that Gordon had been drunk and had forced her at knife point to drive around all day, and he later took her to the woods where he had violated her intimately. He went to the back of the car to urinate, which is when she mistakenly backed up their car over him. She stated that she did not see that the car was in reverse when she started it up, but she put it in drive and drove over him again when pulling forward to drive away. She said that it was an accident and she did not mean to do it. During an autopsy done on Gordon, they had found benzodiazepines, Valium, and Restoril, and large amounts of alcohol in his system. It was judged to be enough to cause his death. Once again, no prescription was found for Gordon for these medications. An examination was also done on Millie, but no evidence of any SA was found. So not only did she marry Gordon twice, but she also drove over him twice. You might say it's overkill with him and this lady. She's like, well, if one doesn't stick, the other one will probably do the job. The remorseless widow, and I put widow in quotation marks, because remember, she's still legally married to her first husband, upon Gordon's death applies for pension benefits from the Department of National Defence and Canada Pension. She also tried getting back with her first husband, Russell Shepard, after the events of 28 April, but he soon realized that he needed to expedite their divorce, which was finalized on 1 May 1991.
A knife in his hand. He told me he was going to kill me, but first he was going to take me somewhere.
It was a compelling story, and her listeners never challenged it.
Later on, early that evening, we went into this road. It was like a logging road in the woods. And he raped me at knife point, and then he got out of the car and he walked around behind the car. He had to urinate. So I saw that as my chance to get away.
You said you were raped.
Yes.
But there was no sort of forensic evidence of a rape.
Well, that's what they said. That's what they said. But then, what can I say? To say that he raped me doesn't mean he has to have sexual intercourse with me. That means he could have performed other kinds of sex on me. That is considered rape.
And then you go back to the car.
He was going to urinate. He went behind the car. I jumped in the car and turned the key on and backed the car up over him.
And then drove ahead.
And then drove ahead because I wanted to get out of that road, and the only way out was to drive ahead.
Over him.
I didn't mean to back the car up over him, even. I just put it in the wrong gear, and it went backwards instead of forwards.
Because what you presented is, he tried to rape you but couldn't.
No, I said...
And in retaliation, you killed him.
When he tried to perform the sexual act, I'm not able to say whether or not he could do it. He had every intention of carrying it out.
I'm just going by the autopsy findings of the toxicology, which said that this guy was hardly able, like he was going to die from the amount of stuff that he had taken on that day. So whether you ran over him or not, he was like toxic with drugs and alcohol. Well, and I have a hard time visualizing a guy being so dangerous that yet you have to run over him with a car.
Well, first of all, I didn't know, when I backed the car up, I didn't know that he was right there. I thought he was behind the car, and I thought that I had hit a log because we were on a logging road. I didn't know it was him that I had hit.
Millie went on trial for the death of Gordon Stewart in April 1992, and during this trial, the judge told the jurors that if they believed she had intended to kill her husband, she should be convicted of second-degree murder, but if they believed it was an accident, they should convict her of manslaughter. On 26 May 1992, she was convicted of the manslaughter of Gordon Stewart and was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. She was sent to the prison for women in Kingston, Ontario, where she formed a convict support group for battered women. During her imprisonment, she is also featured in a documentary film, When Women Kill, which prominently featured her and her battered women support activity in prison. She was released from prison in 1994 on full parole due to good behavior. She then continued her new role as women's advocate by touring the country and giving speeches on battered women syndrome and killing in self-defense. She had also set up a toll-free counseling line for women in prison called Project Another Chance, that she had received a grant for from the government. But this project only took Millie so far. She quickly found herself lonely and broke. In April of 2000, Millie was 66 when she traveled to Florida as the cold of Canada was starting to get to her and she wanted to explore a more tropical setting. There she attended a Christian retreat when she saw a man that piqued her interest. She said that the man was up on stage with a pastor and that the Holy Spirit spoke to her and told her that they should be married.
The Holy Spirit told me that this man would be my next husband.
The Spirit spoke to you and said, that tall guy with the white...
He told me exactly who the person was. I could see him because he was up on the platform with the pastor and some other people because they were planning a trip to Jerusalem. I began speaking in tongues and I really felt the presence of the Holy Spirit.
Robert Friedrich, the man in question, was in his 80s at the time. He was a retired engineer living in Florida. He lost his wife of 53 years in February 1999 to cancer. Millie wrote to him the very next day after her spiritual enlightenment and enclosed a photo of herself. She flat out told Robert that she believed God wanted him to get married. He responded to her letter in May 2000 and invited her to visit him in June. And within 3 days of her arrival, they were engaged to get married. Robert was a father to 3 sons, and when phoning them to tell them the good news, they were of course a bit worried that Millie might be a gold digger, as their father had quite an amount in his banking account at the time of his retirement.
He felt that he was going to be taken care of, that he was happy, that he now had a bride, that he was going to not be alone anymore, someone to cook for him, someone to take care of him, someone to be with, to talk to. And these are things that he'd been missing desperately for the past year.
He was just like a teenager who found his first love, almost. He was just, I think he was so flattered by her, I really do.
In your darkest moments, what was the worst case scenario?
Coming out of the blue and targeting him like that, I always thought that perhaps that she might be a gold digger.
Within the same month of meeting, on 23 June 2000, Robert and Millie were married in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, at a small wedding chapel, after which she went to live with him in Florida. Over the next year, the two traveled extensively on an extended honeymoon of sorts. But Robert's 3 sons start noticing that he was increasingly suffering from slurred speech when they phoned him. He would also suffer fainting spells and faltering health. He even started walking with a walker. When he would come to visit them, he would seem completely fine, but as soon as he went home, the symptoms started up again. He had also been admitted to the hospital quite often, and when doing further checks into his bank account, they noticed that his money had been disappearing quite quickly. In May 2001, Melissa obtained 2 prescriptions for lorazepam from 2 different doctors. Police records show that upon 6 occasions, Melissa got medication from one doctor, and then within 30 days of the first prescription, she received another from a different doctor. In July 2002, one of Robert's sons complained to the elder abuse line, blaming Millie for his father's decline. When she found out about this, she had left a very snotty message.
Hello, Bob. This is Melissa Friedrich calling. I have something to share with you this morning. Your father and I are going to see a lawyer. We've made an appointment, and your father is going to change his will. He's going to leave all the money to me except for the portion that he had set aside for you and your 2 brothers. And that portion now is going to go to the Christian retreat. And you guys are getting nothing. A big, fat 0. So try that on for size and have a nice day.
Around that same time, Robert rewrote his will, leaving out his sons and making Millie the sole beneficiary of his full estate. Before her arrival, Robert Friedrich had intended to divide his estate among his 3 sons. Robert Friedrich died of cardiac arrest on December 16, 2002. Millie hastily arranged to have Robert cremated before an autopsy could be done. She emptied his bank account of what his children stated was around $400,000 and continued to receive his social security checks after his death. Because of his age and the quick cremation process, notwithstanding some suspicion of foul play, Melissa was not charged in connection with the old man's death. Friedrich's son later saw an online report of a conviction on manslaughter with regards to the death of Gordon Stewart that made him wonder whether Millie had been responsible for causing his father's death. The authorities had also regarded Melissa Friedrich with suspicion, but nothing could be proved after their father's cremation. 2 of Robert's sons sued her in 2003 regarding their father's estate. The 2 sons' lawsuit was settled eventually, with Melissa receiving only $15,000 and the remaining funds of the estate going to the true brothers who had sued.
They, to this day, they think you did it. They think you had your hand in that death.
That's not true. I did not have my hand in that death.
Well, they look at the record. You did kill Gordon Stewart.
Yes, after he raped me, I killed him.
And so the Friedrich family say, well, if she killed one husband...
yeah, well, that doesn't mean there's a pattern there, no. Because their father and I had a very good marriage, and we were not hostile towards each other or anything else. But I do feel that I'm being railroaded. And a lot of it is based on past record.
So here's where the family's coming from, and you can correct me. Dad had a little nest egg of maybe $300,000.
That's not true.
He had a house, and he had an insurance policy. Melissa shows up, the $300,000 evaporates. She becomes the sole control of everything else. He starts falling down, his health starts going down. This is essentially their perception.
Yes.
And does it surprise you that they get a little bit anxious?
Well, no, it doesn't. If I were in their shoes, I would probably be the same way, and suspicious and everything else. But
what about the $300,000?
He had $240,000 when I met him. That's what he had.
And where did that go?
And part of that was insurance policies. He had loaned money to his sons over the years, so he had drawn against his insurance policies. But he did name me beneficiary in all his insurance policies. He had 9.
In September 2003, in Florida, the Manatee County Sheriff started investigating Melissa regarding 6 counts of doctor shopping, also known as prescription fraud, for the time period from March 1, 2001 to December 1, 2002. Records showed that she held multiple prescriptions for lorazepam, a potent fast-acting benzodiazepine. But they found that they did not have enough evidence to prosecute her. This is when Melissa decided to return to Port Edward Island. Around this time, Melissa had discovered internet dating. Yikes. In January 2004, Human Resources Development Canada also launched an investigation of Melissa, specifically regarding crimes relating to Old Age Security Act, which they had believed to have occurred between 2000 to 2003.
Melissa had been up to some of her old tricks, even when she was married to the devout Robert Friedrich, stealing money from the Canadian taxpayer, Corporal Alan Affleck.
She was using two different names, Melissa Stewart and Melissa Shepard, under two different social insurance numbers with, I believe, the same date of birth. She was receiving funds and benefits in relation to spousal benefits.
By September 2004, Melissa initiated internet contact with as many as 20 men from across the United States and Canada. She really worked those sites hard, y'all. In October 2004, RCMP visited Melissa at her home in Port Edward Island to ask her questions regarding the investigation into the old age security fraud. And in November 2004, they prepared to lay charges against her, which is when Melissa decided it was time to get out of Dodge and put one of those online hustles that she had initiated to good use. On 5 November 2004, Melissa, who was by then 69 years old, drove to Pinellas Park, Florida, to meet Alex Strategas, a retired and divorced 73-year-old, who was one of several men with whom she had been corresponding on AmericanSinglesDating.com. They have dinner, and he asked her where she was staying. She said that she did not even book a hotel room, and he invited her to stay over at his condo. He told her that he had only one bedroom and that she would have to share a bed with him. She had no issue whatsoever, and they slept together.
Romantic dinner, some introductory chit-chat, and then they went back to his place, just like in the movies.
Yeah, we slept together the first night, but we only have one bedroom, and I told her that ahead of time, and it didn't bother her, so I said, why not?
After the pair shared a good old time in his bed, later that night, Alex is taken to hospital after falling down and hitting his head in his bathroom. Melissa moved into his apartment the very same night that she met him. She even told some neighbors that she was Alex's wife. The neighbors noticed that paramedics were continuously responding to calls at Alex's condominium. Over a 2-month period, Alex was hospitalized 8 times.
The night that she got here, I thought to myself, wow, they must have really whooped it up last night. And then when he was in the hospital, he started feeling better, and it was time for him to go home. But then it started happening again. As soon as he got home, he would get real feeble, real sickly, and he was back in the hospital, falling in the middle of the night, hurting his head. It was something that was happening to him that wasn't natural.
During one of these hospital visits on 28 December 2004, she brought 2 of his neighbors with her when she was visiting him. She went into his room and she gave him a kiss and told him that she loved him. Then she pulled out paperwork for him to sign. She brought the 2 neighbors to sign as witnesses. She made him sign over power of attorney to her while he was in the hospital, which is also the same day that she decided that he needed to be moved to a nursing home. Alex's son Dean was baffled as to what had been causing his father to continuously end up in hospital, never mind the fact that some lady had now put him in a nursing home. During a visit to his father in January 2005, he asked the nurse whether he could have a look at his father's medical chart, which is when he noticed that there were benzodiazepines in his father's routine blood tests. Again, this was not a drug that his father had been prescribed. He then also looked into his father's bank accounts and noticed that $18,000 had been missing, which is when he decided to call the police, and they went after the little old.
She got him to sign a power of attorney when he was completely out of it and didn't know what he was signing, and then she started sniffing around for the deed to the house. Without telling any of the family members. Then I realized that it was probably time to turn investigator and do a little poking around and seeing what was going on with his toxicology reports.
Benzodiazepine. A red flag went up. It's a tranquilizer his father didn't need, and as he'd eventually find out, it was something his father had in common with two other men in Melissa's life, both deceased.
I started making phone calls, called the bank. I called 1-800-96-ABUSE for elderly folks, and I was advised to call the local authorities to make things go a little faster before she flew the coop. She pretty much cleaned him out of everything that he owns and tried to put the condo into her name.
She took his money?
She took all of his money.
How much money?
About $18,000, his life savings. One day, the account had $18,000 in it, and the next day it had like $2.63 in it.
On January 6, 2005, Pinellas Park Police arrested Melissa and charged her with exploitation of the elderly, theft, and forgery. Police surmised that she coerced Strategos to give her power of attorney, and then she siphoned off his money into her own bank account. On February 1, 2005, Nova Scotia RCMP issued a warrant for Melissa's arrest regarding the investigation they had started in 2004 regarding the old age security fraud. She's charged with defrauding the government of Canada of $30,348 over a 4-year period. The fraud offences allegedly took place between around July 1999 and October 2003. On March 14, 2005, Melissa Friedrich pleads guilty to 7 charges related to the Strategos case, including 3 counts of grand theft from a person 65 years or older, 2 counts of forgery, and 2 counts of using a forged document. As part of a plea agreement, she's sentenced to 5 years in jail. During an interview, Alex Strategos said that he might have fallen ill on the first night due to his beloved drugging him with ice cream. He said that she gave him ice cream most nights that they were together, and that she fed it to him in bed.
When I'd go to bed, she'd bring me a little dish of ice cream. Not more, a little custard cup, maybe a couple teaspoons or something like that. And she'd bring it into the bedroom and she'd feed it to me. I guess that's where the drugs were. Then I'd get up to go to the bathroom and fall flat in my face.
And I say that figure is not correct. He didn't have $18,000 for me to clean out.
Well, we know about an $8,000 payment that you made. $800 to your daughter. It was $5,000 money order.
The police have that $5,000 money order.
But we're getting warm here. We're getting close to $18,000 when you put all that stuff together. And it all comes out of Mr. Strategos' meager assets.
No, the figure is wrong. That figure is wrong. Where they get, you're talking $800 and
$8,000.
$8,000 and $5,000. That's $13,800. Okay, that's still not $18,000.
No, but we're getting in the ballpark.
Well, I still say I did not clean him out of that much money. He had asked me to pay his bills. I got him to sign a power of attorney.
When he was pretty far gone, he was hardly able to sign his name at the time because of what they eventually claim was that old word benzodiazepine in his system. You can see the pattern.
Yes. Yes, well.
You can see where this all adds up to a fairly incriminating set of circumstances as far as Melissa Friedrich is concerned.
Well, yes, that sounds very bad. And I can't say that I didn't personally give him benzodiazepines. If he had them in his system, we already knew, he knew and I knew that our relationship was not going to continue.
On 4 April 2009, Melissa is released from prison in Florida and she is deported back to Canada. Upon her release, she had been living on her own in a seniors apartment building in Nova Scotia, and she had been making good on her promise to not cause any more trouble. But of course, this is Millie that we are speaking about, and it didn't take too long before she got up to more of her old tricks. In September 2012, at the age of 78 years old, she knocked on the door of a neighbor, 75-year-old widower Fred Weeks. She told him that she heard he was lonely and that she had been lonely too. And that is how they started a relationship. Fred had lost his wife of half a century just 18 months earlier. He mostly kept himself busy with cribbage games and karaoke outings, but he was lonely, and he had welcomed Millie's attention. The couple married after a whirlwind courtship on September 25, after knowing each other less than a month. Fred had gone to his friend George Maheny, a justice of the peace, and asked him to marry them. George was happy to help out his friend, as he and Millie seemed very happy. Very shortly after the wedding, someone phoned George to tell him about Millie having appeared on a documentary regarding her previous crimes and told George that he needed to warn Fred. He tried to get hold of his friend to try and warn him, but couldn't, which is when he phoned the police to try and intercept the couple on their way to the ferry that would start their Newfoundland honeymoon trip. And he asked them to warn Weeks about his bride's pattern of trouble with the law. Unsurprisingly, the police refused to involve themselves in this errand. Melissa and Fred Weeks got on the ferry. Fred had to be wheelchaired off the ferry after Melissa stated they had a rough ferry crossing. The newlyweds checked into the Chambers Guest House in North Sydney, Nova Scotia, on September 28th, upon which Millie informed the innkeeper of their rough ferry crossing and said that her husband wasn't feeling well, and the couple remained in their room for the rest of the day. The innkeeper thought she heard someone fall in the night, but Millie insisted that everything was fine. The next morning, she asked the innkeeper to call an ambulance for Fred, but Millie insisted on finishing her breakfast first before the call was made. The innkeeper called for an ambulance, and paramedics found Fred Weeks on the floor of the couple's room, in the bed and breakfast, very weak and disoriented.
Following morning, it was clear that everything was far from fine. Mrs. Weeks over breakfast suggested taking her husband to the local hospital. Cheryl offered to call an ambulance right away.
And she said, no, not yet. She said, I want to finish eating and just, because I'm going to be there all day. It's going to be a long day. So that's when I dialed 911.
On 30 September, Weeks' son called the police, as he started suspecting foul play after some very sus behavior from Millie. Apparently, she had been telling hospital staff that her new husband had been suffering from dementia and that he had no children. Not only did he have a son, but he also had a daughter. And the children agreed that their father's only medical problem that he suffered from was high cholesterol. The police soon found that Millie had also told the neighbors at the seniors' villa where they were staying that Weeks was childless and struggled with dementia and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and that he had suffered multiple heart attacks. Upon the suspicion of his children, Fred's blood is tested and they found a very high dose of benzodiazepine in his system. Police confined Millie and searched their apartment. They found 144 tablets of lorazepam, a small amount of temazepam, 3 unlabeled empty bottles, prescriptions from 5 different doctors, and a suspicious type of ice cream that would have to be analyzed. On the very same day, Melissa is charged with attempted murder and administering a noxious thing, the noxious thing being the benzos. Fred Weeks luckily survived this ordeal and is later released from hospital. He had been trying to piece together what happened for the next week or so. He remembered little between the wedding and waking up in the hospital, and he wasn't convinced that they even took the ferry. shortly after he learned that there was a mistake on their marriage license and that it meant that they weren't in fact married. Their union was ruled invalid by the province's Vital Statistics Division after it said false information was provided on their marriage certificate. On June 10, 2013, Melissa pleads guilty to administering a noxious thing and failing to provide necessity of life. Forget about the charge of attempted murder. That was not going to fly with Millie. She was sentenced to serve 3.5 years behind bars for her crimes. On his closing, the judge stated, "People that have contact with this old lady should be careful." Millie was released from prison on 18 March 2016 at the age of 82, under several strict conditions. Her access to prescriptions of certain medications would be limited. She was to use no device that would allow her access to the internet. She was to let the police know if she were to make any changes to her appearance, and she had to inform police if she formed any intimate relationships, so that they could inform these men of her criminal past, so they were aware of what they were getting themselves into. She was said to be residing in Halifax area upon her release, and as she was assessed to be a high risk of reoffending, she had to remain on parole. On April 11, 2016, Melissa was seen at the Halifax Central Library, accessing the internet by a community response officer, and she was also found with a device capable of accessing the internet during this incident, which were breaches of the release conditions that she received just a month earlier. She was charged with breaching the terms on her release. On August 4th, her lawyer entered not guilty pleas for the 3 counts of breaching a recognizance, including a ban on accessing the internet on her behalf. Her trial was set to begin on 1 February 2017, but the charges were dropped on December 22, 2016. Not much is known about where Melissa is today and what she's doing, but it is said that she still lives in Canada and she seems to be keeping low profile.
How long can this go on?
It can't. It just can't. And this is probably, even if they do put me in prison and keep me there, this is probably going to be how I'll end my life.
Let's say that some judge says she's old and she's not a threat to society anymore, but there is a pattern going back for 30-some years of illegal activity all the way up to manslaughter. Can you change?
I can't say that from now on I'll be a perfect citizen, but I'm just going to try day by day to behave myself and to do what I should have been doing all along. But I can't say that that is going to be the outcome of how my life will end.
As always, thank you so much for watching the video. Let me know your thoughts and opinion in the comments below. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye!